A tentative agreement between Unite Here Local 11 and food service provider Sodexo has been announced. The labor dispute threatened the Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles when all the candidates who had qualified for the debate pledged not to cross the picket line.
At the same time, all of the candidates who have qualified have thrown their support behind Cory Booker's calls to change the debate qualification criteria. Joining us to weigh in on all of this is Communications Director for the Democratic National Committee, Xochitl Hinojosa. Xochitl, thank you so much for being with us. Let's just start with Senator Booker's request here to change the debate criteria. So basically, you would either make the polling criteria or make the donation criteria. It's a demand that all of the candidates have signed on to. What's your response?
Well, we have had a fair and inclusive process. Back in February, we briefed all the presidential campaigns that our debate threshold would go up later in the year because our thresholds and the way that we look at things is as the race progresses, you need to show that you are progressing as well. And so we looked at history and we looked at what people have polled at this point in the race. And what we found is that no one who is polling under 4% consistently in the race at this point goes on to be our Democratic nominee. And so we have been very clear with all of the candidates that the threshold would go up, and no one complained about it then. And I'm not surprised that Cory Booker is doing this now. He is a friend of the Democratic Party. He is someone who we have a lot of respect for, but he didn't make the debate stage this last time. And so I think that's what you're seeing. The other thing I want to remind everyone is that Kamala Harris did make the debate stage, but she dropped out ahead before. It wasn't because of the debate. She talks about other reasons, and I think that we can have a larger conversation about people of color and candidates of color and why they haven't done as well this late in the race. But I think that our rules have been very fair. And just to be clear, there have been 26 qualifying polls for this debate. And so you only have to reach 4% four times out of 26 polls.
Right. I think it's an eminently fair one. But one criticism I have heard, and I think Tom Perez has expressed some openness to this, is that Michael Bloomberg, because of the fact that he is not accepting any donations, won't qualify on the stage. But Xochitl, I mean, he's got quite a bit of support, the 5 to 7% number. Would it be worth trying to make it so that Bloomberg, who with so much money having spent in this race, at least is able to be challenged by some of his Democratic challengers? What do you think?
Well, we aren't making the threshold based on any one candidate. That wouldn't be fair to the process. And we're committed to be fair and transparent throughout this entire process. And so what we have said and what Tom Perez has said is that we will remain and have the donor threshold that it is in place, which I believe has helped the Democratic Party really grow its grassroots fundraising. We will keep that criteria through January. Once voting starts, then we will take a fresh look at everything because we want to make sure that our threshold and our criteria for these debates actually reflects the votes of the people in the early states and those contests. So that is what he has said. We still will revisit all of this once people start once we're looking at contests when people start voting, but through January, it will remain.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, look, in Bloomberg's case, most of the candidates are trying desperately to make the stage. In his case, you also don't want a situation where a candidate who's able to spend lots of money, communicate as much as he can, is avoiding accountability essentially. But what you explained made sense. I also wanted to ask you though about often lost in this conversation about diversity on the debate stage is the fact that Andrew Yang, Asian American candidate, has made the debate stage, someone who came out of nowhere, had no political background, businessman, virtually unknown, and has outlasted governors, senators, members of Congress, etc. What do you think that says about the Democratic Party today that a virtual unknown is able to come in and do better than a lot of the established players?
Well, I think that's the beauty of a primary is that whenever you don't know who is going to make it to the top of the mountain, right? And as Tom Perez has said, is that he wants to make sure, I think we started this race with over 25 candidates. We are down closer to 15, but when we had 25 candidates, and even now, we have a lot of depth in our party, and that is a good problem to have. And we have been able to showcase our candidates through these debates. And so what you've seen is some candidates take advantage of the platform and really move voters And I think that Andrew Yang is someone who has come to our party and is someone who has brought amazing ideas. You also have someone like Julian Castro, who has talked about immigration, I think has moved the ball forward. You also have people like Amy Klobuchar talking about, winning in Minnesota and really trying to get to rural voters. So I think that everyone in this race has brought a lot to the race. And I think the beauty about our primary is that it has been a fair process. And if you have a message that works and that resonates, then you will rise to the top.
Xochitl, I do want to ask you about speaking time. I mean, does the DNC have any ability or influence on the amount of speaking time that candidates get? Because one of the complaints that we have seen consistently is that things will be over-skewed to the establishment. That we hear from a lot of our viewers here, which is that somebody who might be polling at 2% might be getting 10 times the amount of speaking time as a fellow candidate who's getting 2%. How do you ensure the equitability and the fairness of that process from an institutional perspective?
Well, while we don't control questioning, we are in touch with the networks, and we do emphasize that we want to make sure that not one candidate is getting all of the time. Now, in the rules, if your name is mentioned or if you are attacked, then you have the ability to respond. And so a lot of times what happens is that many people who are polling the highest are the ones that are attacked on the debate stage, and then therefore you see them getting more time because they get the opportunity to respond, which is fair. Is fair. They should have that opportunity. And so, but I think that with all of these debates, and I think when you mentioned the letter earlier in this segment about other presidential campaigns signing it, which one thing is clear is that the larger the debate stage is, the less time you have to speak. And so if we are loosening the criteria for the debate stage, that means that you will have more people qualify for the debate and you will have less time to get your message across.
Right.
And we are mindful of that. We want to make sure that we are have debates that are not only substantive, which I believe that they have been, but as you get closer to the contest, that these candidates are able to talk directly to the American people and that the American people can make decisions ahead of their contest.
Yeah.
I mean, Cory Booker is a perfect example because in all of these debates, even though he hasn't been polling very well, he's gotten lots of speaking time. That's not been an issue for him. At the other end of the spectrum is Andrew Yang, who in many instances has actually outpolled Cory Booker. But at the last debate, he didn't get called on until more than 30 minutes in. He had 6 minutes plus of speaking time, way less than other candidates polling at a similar level. So from your perspective, have you been satisfied with the equitability of speaking time across these debates?
I think that we are always, and I think, frankly, I think the networks are always looking on ways to improve. I think for every debate you have seen, and when we have talked to the networks, they always look back at the debate before. And you have seen some tweaks here and there. For example, after the first debate, you've seen networks sort of not gone forward with show of hand questions, right? You've seen tweaks like that. You've seen tweaks to the response times, especially because some candidates felt like they didn't have enough time to respond. And so you have seen tweaks throughout the debate cycle. Now we are halfway through. We have 6 more debates. And I think that you will continue to see the networks improve on the previous one.
Got it.
Yeah, I actually personally like the show of hands question. That's just me.
Me too.
Last question for you. We're headed into potentially a lengthy impeachment trial in the Senate. There are a number, obviously, of Democratic candidates who are sitting senators who would be tied up in Washington, D.C. during much of January, while I'm sure they want to be out on the campaign trail, making their case to voters as we head into those first Iowa caucuses. Are you concerned about that dynamic taking our candidates off of the trail?
I'm not. I think that all of these candidates understand that their number one responsibility is to do their jobs and to go to the Senate and to be a juror. This is a really important time in our country, and frankly, a really sad time in our country. I don't think any senator or member of Congress who was elected was going to Washington, D.C. wanting to impeach the president. What happened was that the president ended up with his wrongdoing and his abuse of power, and it's Congress's responsibility to hold this president accountable. So it is a sad day in our country right now. And I think that every senator understands that responsibility, and that responsibility comes first before campaigning.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Xochitl. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.